Welcome. This service
Hello, everybody. It's 6 o'clock, and we'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order of the City Council Library Building Subcommittee. How's everyone this Monday night? We are in the home stretch, everyone. I'm going to miss you guys next Monday night. So tonight, according to our agenda, we are, of course, going to allow for public comment, but before we started, Councilmember Middleton would like to say a few words.
Okay, I will keep this very short, but I want to thank everyone who's been a part of this process up to this time. Both the individuals who have been a part of this panel, we have heard very, very good reports of the work that you've done, but in particular would like to give thanks to everyone in the public who has come forward and provided very thoughtful comments to us, and I know that has informed the work of the committee, and I look forward on October 23rd when these recommendations come to City Council to hear from you again at the time that City Council has a opportunity to hear fully the recommendations from the group. We've done just a very small amount of keeping people on City Council informed. This practice that we have of appointing blue ribbon panels to look at important issues is something that we've done many times in Palm Springs, and it always provides us with better information that allows council to ultimately make a much more informed decision. So we're looking forward to the conversation on the 23rd, which will not be the end of work. In many respects, that will simply be the beginning as you identify and council considers what is the best site, and we start to move forward on that process. But actual construction, actual building documents, and I could go on and on, will take place after that work has been done on October 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to call for public comment, and because there seems to be a larger crowd than usual, we want everyone to have their opportunity. We've been using a 2-minute rule, but tonight we're going to go to 3 minutes. And that's so that we can get through tonight's deliberation. And as a lot of you know who have been here, even during the deliberations, people raise their hands and have a comment. So it's not like that once you speak, you're forever going to never speak again. So, but for your initial comments, please come forward or use the microphone, and we'll be timing for 3 minutes. So who would like to come first?
You want to sit there? Okay.
Hello, everybody. I'm Peter Maruzzi with the Palm Springs Modern Committee. Since not everyone, maybe in the internet world, has heard or read the editorial that I wrote, I'm just going to repeat it, but with more emphasis. In the early 70s, it was determined that the new library should be built on a major thoroughfare near mass transit in the center of the city. That same reasoning applies today. But let's consider the 4 other options. Block G, adjacent to the new downtown park, is in the west end of the city, has issues of accessibility and traffic, and will be too congested for parents picking up and dropping off children. In other words, it's not convenient for residents who are the library's primary users. 1450 North Palm Canyon Drive is a small site that's inadequate for a library with sufficient parking. The future College of the Desert site, while adjacent to the high school, is just 2 blocks north of the current library. But is a busy college campus the best place for kids versus Sunrise Park with its Boys and Girls Club, skate park, swim center, and access to the high school? And the tribal parcel at Dinah Shore and Crosley, while a large site, is too far east on land the city would not own. So let's consider the library's current location again. Architecturally, the big building is a brilliant expression of 1970s modernism that hugs the ground with its slanted concrete walls and raised center roof for admitting natural light. As the last building designed by renowned local architect William F. Cody, it is a commanding sculptural presence sited for maximum visibility from Sunrise Way. The Cody Design Library is a must-see stop on the modernist map that supports the economic engine of heritage tourism in Palm Springs. In addition to the existing library's centrality, nearby youth activities, and convenience to Meisel Senior Center, needed parking can be placed on the library's south side. Importantly, Sunrise Park is safer and more welcoming since the police department's mobile command unit arrived. Looking toward the future, perhaps a proposed 60,000 square foot building isn't a prerequisite given how technology is changing the way libraries provide services. If it's determined that the existing library doesn't provide enough space, a new annex could be built near the library's northeast corner. Taking all these considerations into account, the deciding factor of the city will probably be the estimated cost of rehabilitating the existing library, building an adjacent library annex, or constructing an entirely new library elsewhere. At present, these costs have not been calculated because the program objectives for the library have yet to be determined. Certainly the most eco-friendly option would be to renovate and reconfigure the current library because the greenest building is one that already exists. Now I'm going to say something new that I didn't actually have in the editorial. One additional point. An argument for a new library has been that the current library could remain open while the new building is being constructed. My suggestion is to first construct a new annex adjacent to the library, use it as a temporary library while the original building is renovated and upgraded. Thanks.
Hello. My name is Brad Dunning. I'm a former appointee to the Historic Site Preservation Board and currently on the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation. And I can't get used to bifocals, so I have to switch glasses. I'm just here to reiterate what I said at a previous meeting, that I feel we have a beautiful, important library already, perfectly located, and we should continue to support it and have pride in it. I don't understand why the city would want to waste so much time and money when we already have a striking and unique building by a noted and much respected local architect, and it seems room to expand around it and grow. I have done some quick research online about libraries across the country that needed more space or wanted more up-to-date facilities. I honestly did not find one instance where a library, especially an architecturally significant one such as ours, simply abandoned ship. They chose to expand and add on to their already established building or buildings. I came armed with visual aids. Will you please just look at a small sampling of libraries, large and small, in California and elsewhere, that added on to their original buildings, if an addition is really needed. There are so many more pressing problems and uses for funds in Palm Springs than starting over and building a new main library. Just imagine how long it would take and the discussions it would generate, especially when we have such a beautiful and architecturally important one now already. Can I pass these around or choose to have a look at them? Those are libraries, including the Los Angeles Central Library, of course, but historic libraries that, when they needed more space and needed upgrades, chose to add on instead of just move. Thank you.
Can I just have these around for them?
Oh, thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
Can't do anything without her.
Thank you.
Good evening. I think most of you know me. My name is Dick Burkett. I'm chair of the HSPB, but I'm not here as an official representative of the HSPB, but as an interested citizen. First of all, I want to thank the committee. I realize the depth of this project and what a fast track it's been on. I've been on a lot of subcommittees, but the task that you all have been assigned to is probably tenfold about what most subcommittees are charged to do. So I applaud you for that. I look at this as how fortunate for Palm Springs that the city owns a Cody Design Library, which anchors the northwest end of a large campus of community buildings. That's what really makes it special. The interrelation of the Mizell Senior Center, the Community Swim Center, Leisure Center, the Pavilion, and the Library Center in a park setting, which borders the high school, is a brilliant campus concept that would be the envy of many cities. And when when you think of the demographics of who uses the library, this is really a community-oriented part of the entire campus with the library, and definitely an educational center. I also think most of us think of a library as being a collecting point of history. And I'd mentioned once before, I really applaud accessing the past and what you've done, which really does exactly that. It captures our history. And so by maintaining the present library with the potential of an expansion is a logical and I think a respectful option to consider. So the city also, I'd like to mention, has branded itself as an architectural mecca with our treasure trove of properties between the 40s and 70s, which is a major contributor to the city, both economically as well as international attention. However, this recognition is only made possible through preservation. I knew you all knew I were going to say that and hit on preservation. So it only seems natural that the city of Palm Springs would restore one of its key assets. I would urge you to join other city-owned properties, which include City Hall, the airport, the Plaza Theater, and the Francis Stevens School, in selecting the present Cody Library as your choice of option. And I just have, just to sort of highlight the work of Cody, if you just sort of pass these around, I thought I would just share with you just some of his key work for the commercial buildings that he has done here in Palm Springs. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hello, Library Subcommittee. I've attended most of the meetings, and you guys are asking very great questions. I am a retired librarian. I've been working for libraries since the mid-'80s. I retired from the San Francisco Public Library as part of the Main management team and the interim assistant chief of the Main and the first floor manager. What I would like, I'm also part of I'm on the Sunrise Park Neighborhood Organization Board, so the library is currently in my neighborhood, and I'm also on the Library Foundation. I would like to recommend that whichever location you choose, you consider an option that includes 1 or 2 branches to enhance library services for all Palm Springs residents. I know you're not considering budget at this time, but branches can simply be a storefront. Branch libraries are a positive influence in their neighborhoods. Branches impact the community's well-being. Residents with transportation issues or mobility issues will benefit from having a local branch. Individuals and households who are linguistically isolated also benefit from neighborhood branches. Palm Springs has pockets whose language spoken at home is not English. In fact, 17% of the residents in District 1 do not speak English well, according to the city's district mapping. So in closing, I just wanted to urge you to also consider that as you're considering locations, about the possibility of branch locations. And thank you. Great job, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Mark Eagle. I live in the Twin Palms West area, and I'm probably one of your newest residents of Palm Springs. It'll be 2 months tomorrow that I closed on my property. Thank you. Thank you. And I only heard this morning on the Neighbor Works site about what was going on with the library. I've been to the library several times since I've moved here. I love it. I'm not a fan of, I am a fan of 50s and 60s architecture, mid-century modern. I'm not a particular fan of 70s mid-century modern or 70s architecture in general, because I think of lowered ceilings, the energy crisis and all of that. But I love this library. I think it's fantastic. I love the atrium in the middle with the fish tank around it and everything, and it seems nothing like a closed-in space at all. I also agree that in my opinion, it seems to be the best location for, of the 5 locations that you have in mind. And I hope that you decide to keep that location. And I think that, it's just a great spot. And it's the first library that I've ever been to where they don't have late fees. And not that I'm overdue. Not that I'm overdue. I'm not yet anyway. But I thank you I'm excited to be living here. I just recently retired early, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited about the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Joy Brown Meredith. I've lived in Palm Springs since 1978. My children and my grandchildren and my grandchildren's children all actually use the Palm Springs Library. So I just wanted to bring that up, ever since they were little. Actually, Tracy lived across the street from me for a while, but that's another story, I guess. I just wanted to say, though, that first of all, one thing I really want to say is I'm very sorry that I'm getting involved in this late in the game here. I didn't really realize the timeline on it, or I certainly would have spoken to people sooner. I know I probably wouldn't like it that much to have me here right now. So thanks for listening to me, though. I just really love the location of where it is. I love that it's near Boys and Girls Club and the high school, and I love that it's in the park. I think that some of the issues that already existed there could be addressed. I think that, having the police trailer there now has been very helpful in helping with some of the problems that have been going on. I think that there's plenty of room there to expand on parking, which I think has always been a problem. But those things seem like they could be addressed. And I'm really interested and very open-minded to hear today what some of the reasons were. I tried to look on this sheet here, and it looks to me like current site is winning, but I'm not exactly sure how you did these points here, but I'm very interested to hear it today. So I just really do support some sort of work at the existing site. I don't find any of these other sites to really be that suitable. I realize that libraries are not just for locals, and that, tourists might want to go to them too, but they could find it where it is now. But can locals find it or get there quite as easily at some of these other locations? And I'm not really seeing that. So I just want to be here to say that, and I thank you all. This is a very big group of people here that have been working on this, and thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sydney Williams. I was on the HSPB for a number of years. I'm a retired curator of architecture and design, so I care a great deal about the building. And I just want to echo what Peter Maruzzi and Brad Dunning and others have said about the history and the architecture. But I also have another concern, and that is that I'm involved with this COD task force, with the architecture of the new campus. And I understand that the COD needs for a campus library are very different than a community library. And I think we should be very specific about what our community needs and the location that's going to serve the community best. And I feel that the COD campus is going to be a long-time building. You know, they're not even in the planning, you know, the site plan hasn't even been drawn up yet. So I think we should be really thinking hard about the community and how it relates to our history and to our culture here. Some of you may have seen an article that was in the New York Times this weekend about a woman from Clinton, Arkansas, writing about the reaction to raising her librarian's salary from $19 an hour to $25, and the pushback that she got in the community, or the whole people that cared about it. And I think our community cares more. And I think we support libraries, we support museums, and we support architecture. So I thank you for all the things that you're doing to make that happen.
Anyone else?
Hello, I couldn't let one last meeting go by without talking to you guys. I'm sorry. With all respect, and again, thank you all for your time, and I love what Ms. Williams just said too. And gosh, we've waited probably 3 years since this whole thing about COD came to light, and I don't even know, how that all happened and how we got to this place of needing a new library. And that's been at least 3 years, and I'm afraid we're going to wait another 3 years for them to kind of figure out what they want and where they're going. And do we want to put our eggs in someone else's basket when we already have other viable options that we control? And I think that's important. I just wanted to point out, because I know tonight you're going to be going over the criteria, and I saw two glaring inconsistencies, and they were on page 2. So if you flip over, and again, I'm not hiding my bias. Obviously, I'm much prefer to see the city do the responsible thing and the fiscally responsible thing, and that is a rehabilitation. And I know costs are not part of this discussion, but the site considered safe for general public, I thought was interesting that it was a pretty hard no for the library and a very positive hard yes for COD, which is only less than 2 blocks away. So I wish that you would revisit that. And I'm going to echo what one of your members voiced during one of the meetings, where she said that her students, as a teacher, her parents were coming to her and saying, please keep the library where it is. Our children are safe there. We don't want our children downtown in particular. Obviously, they weren't referring to COD, but they definitely had an issue with downtown. And I feel if parents of children think the current space is safe, and I know the park was a bit of an issue. The city's been addressing it. Other than that, we've got a Boys and Girls Club. We've got a lot of activity, the high school. So again, that no versus yes between COD, 2 blocks. Not to mention that the COD space is on the Farrell 500. I don't feel that that's real safe as far as speeds on that traffic. You should see these moms running late to dropping their kids off to school in the morning. Trust me, I bike. And it's scary. Then a few down from that, also a hard no on the current library for adjacent uses that complement a library in terms of function, peak use times, and so on. A hard no on the current location, but yet a hard yes for the COD location. Now, the COD location puts you further away from retail, puts you further away from retirement villages, puts you further away from the Boys and Girls Club, the Mizell Center, and a park. Again, I just scratched my head with that, so I hope that you'll revisit those two. Obviously, I think adjusting some of that opinion will delight myself and most of the audience here tonight. And again, thank you very much for all of your time.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Hello, my name is Brendan Steidel. I live just about a block away from the library's current location, so I do kind of lean towards keeping it there. And I do like the architecture of it. My only point would be that I hope we can find a way to preserve the architecture without holding us back from what a new modern library will look like for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And so maybe that means, a more extensive renovation. Maybe it means expanding to an additional building outside. But I would just hope that, our appreciation for the architecture doesn't keep us in the past. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, Michael. My name is Kitty Kiley Hayes. I'm one of the original members of the Historic Sites Preservation Board. And when we got going in 1982, the library was only 6 years old, so who would think that it would be a historic site, at least then. As a child, my mother toted me down to Wellwood Murray Library when she checked out books until I was old enough to do it myself. And I spent a lot of my childhood down there. And when it was exploding at the seams, I was part of the committee that passed Proposition R to build a new library. And it was really astounding to me that we could get this great, big, beautiful place. It's in such a perfect location. It's easy for visitors. It's easy for residents. You can get there by bus, by walk, by bicycle, and everything. And it's also a really terrific building. Bill did a terrific job. Bill Cody did a terrific job. It's got really good bones to it. It was built in such a way as you can gut that building and do whatever you want because he wanted it to be flexible for the future. So it seems like you've got a really good chance to do whatever you want with the inside. You can put ancillary buildings on every corner. It's a good place for the future of the library. Thank you all for all of your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? I would like to say personally thank you to everyone who's here and who's been here every time. It really does mean a lot. I'm going to put my library trustee hat on and say that I hope I see your faces here when we have trustee meetings, when we have budget requests, when we are talking about what we're going to do for expanded library services. And please join the Friends if you haven't, because they're a wonderful support for the library. So I know that you're passionate about it and you love our library, and I want to see your faces here. We meet every last Thursday of the month, so please come and support the library as much as you can, and you have been. I really do appreciate that. All right. As you guys will recall, last time we met, we decided on our agenda for tonight, and we're going to do a brief review of the process that we helped establish from the very beginning. And you will recall that we spent time with our consultant. Sue is actually here with us today, not trying to listen to us on the phone or watching us on YouTube. And the consultants guided us through establishing criteria that a lot of communities have used to do the same thing that we're doing here, is trying to identify where is the best location for a library for their community. We also spent a considerable amount of time talking about what we thought were unique to Palm Springs and how our community is unique and how this criteria might be a little more unique to that. And then we all agreed that we would measure every site that was given to us. At that time, you'll recall, there were 3 that were given to us. Overnight, we went to 6. We dropped back down to 5. You guys just went with the roll. You rolled with it, and I know the look on some of your faces when I said we went from 6, now we're at 5, was, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? Well, I think that we have done it, and I think that we have managed to get through the criteria. Tonight, we're going to revisit where we didn't agree. recall we were going to do that. And we're going to take another vote on the ones that we did not agree on to see if they change to a majority. If they don't, we're okay with that. But we wanted to have one more opportunity to look at those items where we disagreed and give ourselves a chance. Yeah.
Apropos of the comment that we heard from the public, and in an acknowledgement of that, when we first started, this tool was really rough, and obviously the first site that we did was the existing library, and perhaps we could revisit those two that were pointed out because they are intellectually inconsistent. And I think once we got kind of rolling and good at the tool, those might have come out differently.
Absolutely, and I actually wrote myself notes on those, recalling why we voted no. So I think that sure, we can, I'm more than happy to revisit those. Yeah, yeah. We also agreed at the last meeting that before we went through this exercise, we would talk about, is there a possibility of eliminating anything at this point so that we don't visit something that we all feel probably is just not the right match for us at this point? So I'm looking at the committee, and do you all still feel in favor of that? We want to do that. Okay. So I think the best option for that is we'll do it the way we've been doing, is majority will rule unless someone in the committee would like to make a recommendation about a site. But we also, remember, we're going to then give you an opportunity to talk about the process individually after we go through that. So I want to make sure we're still okay with having a discussion about the site considerations. Go first. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to have each of you speak to what you've gotten from this and how you feel about the sites. And then we're going to do a straw vote to see if there's anything that we can eliminate before we go through and review the criteria again. Is everyone okay with that?
I have a question. My question is, so that we are not going through the evaluation of all 5 sites, do we want to take any of them off before we spend the time to do that?
Well, I think that so we want to, yes, so I think that we want to see if there's any that we can pull off before we go through each individual
Great.
ones.
Thank you.
So but the agenda says for us right now to look at the site considerations document that you've been working on, and then go to having the committee discuss the sites individually, which is what we had talked about, and then do the straw vote. Do we want to rearrange that? Am I hearing that?
I think that at the last meeting, my recollection was that we did rearrange it and that this is the revised order in case there was a site or sites that we just wanted to dispense with, so we didn't spend a lot of time discussing their merits unnecessarily.
Okay. So can we just let's do a vote on the change of the agenda just for the record. Is that okay? So all in favor
I
of the
move,
change?
I move.
We have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, straw vote to eliminate any site or any rationale. So I will turn to the committee. Does anyone have a recommendation they'd like for us to discuss, or do you want to do just a majority, go one through each of them and do a hand vote? I look to the committee to give me some guidance on this. Yes.
And this, just to confirm, this is to keep it in consideration, right?
Correct.
That's the only vote that this would be.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Going one
Kathy's on the phone.
Kathy, can you hear us?
Yes.
Good. Do you have something to say? We heard you. Do you want to make a comment?
Oh, I was just turning off
Okay.
YouTube.
All right, thank you. Speak up. We know you're out there, so please speak up. Okay, so let's go through and we're going to vote on keeping them in consideration. And so the majority will keep them in consideration. The fewer the votes, it means that they will go to the last one and talk about it. Is that okay? And decide that it's going off the list. Is that okay? All right, so option 1, our current library site. Those in favor of keeping it on the list, please raise your hand. Kathy, would you like to vote with a vocal?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Option 2 is the Lot G downtown. Those in favor of keeping that on the list, would you like to raise your hand? So there's 4 of those. Option number 3, College of the Desert campus, if you'd like to keep it on the list.
Yes.
4 on that one.
5, plus Kathy was 5.
Okay. Option 4, I think that we confirmed, by the way, that it's probably 1,500 North Palm Canyon instead of 1,450, by the way. So those who would like to keep 1,500 North Palm Canyon on the list for consideration, please raise your hand.
Yes.
3. And finally, option number 5 is the site next to the tribal headquarters on Dinah Shore. Those who would like to keep that on the list, please raise your hand. Kathy?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. So by process of elimination, option number 5, the tribal site is coming off of our list. That's in our agreement? Okay. All right, so do you mind reading us the votes on the others? So we
Sure.
know that the current site definitely is a stay. So
10 to 0 on the current library site. Block G is 4 to 6. College of the Desert's 5 to 5. And the North Palm Canyon site is 3 to 7. And Dinah Shore and Crossley is 0 to 10.
Okay. All right, so I think then let's have a little discussion about the ones where we don't agree. And as we've done on all of our practice so far, is that we have given time to having us speak what we think about that. So those of you who voted, I guess we should say, those who voted to take it off the list, is that fair enough? Is that okay? So for those of you who voted to take, let's start with option number 4, Palm Canyon. For those of you who decided to take it off the list, does that make sense, or to keep it on? Yeah.
Just a point of clarification, I thought it was majority rules, and if they
Okay.
didn't get majority vote, that we don't even discuss it. It's just
Okay.
off the list. I'm just going to throw that out there to save
Okay.
time.
All right. So that would eliminate everything except the current site?
Could be a short meeting.
No, no, there's one that's 5 to 5,
5 to 5,
right?
so
All right.
There's one that's 7 to 3.
Well, so
And
take it
to
off.
take it off, so it gets off, and the 5 to 5 is the only one that needs to be discussed. The
And then
majority
Block
leaves
G is
2.
4 to 6.
So is that okay with everyone?
The only thing is, I think it would be good for the council to say why we don't want it on the list.
Except that we went over that when we did the site considerations for each site. It was pretty clear and discussed a lot.
And just, I guess my question for the group is, we're saying that our recommendation, our top recommendation, and also our backup recommendation is only scenarios of option 1 and 3 if we're eliminating option 2 and 4. Is that what we're saying?
Well, we're a subcommittee of council, and we have a council representative here. And in my initial discussion with council member person Middleton, she asked that we do rank and then give some reasons so that they can have a discussion about it at council. So I kind of agree with, it doesn't have to drag on for hours, but I kind of agree with Kathy that we should probably throw a few concerns at each of the ones we're eliminating, just so council understands why. They're not going to look at this list.
But the consultant can construct a paragraph for each one of those based on what we've already said before, unless you feel strongly, like speak up about whatever one.
I'll defer to the council person on this.
It would be really helpful, because we had a very difficult time hearing some of the discussion. If we could just do a quick recap on why, well, I actually could hear Palm Canyon and the tribal site last week a little bit, but I think it would be helpful for people to know why it's being taken off the list.
And Ed, did you want me to go over my spreadsheet that I did to tally these scores, or do you want to talk about that at all?
Let's hold that until we go through and we clarify where we have to vote again.
Okay.
I do not want to impose on your process. That's your process. When we receive a report, it will be helpful if you say, we believe site X should not be considered, and here's the reason why we believe it should not be considered. That's a fairly strong statement, and I would encourage you to at least provide a few paragraphs of explanation. It sounds as if those are already there, but at the point that it is a final written document. What you say shouldn't be considered is a statement that is extremely helpful to us.
Could I make a suggestion? We have the two that we are agreeing to. Could we discuss those thoroughly, the reasons pro and cons about those, and then once we have a good explanation and a good structure, then we can come back to the other three and tell you the strong reasons why those didn't make them, instead of starting backwards. Because we want to give emphasis to the top two and why the top two should really be considered.
And remember, this was a straw vote, so now we could go through the criteria to the ones we didn't disagree to see if that changes anything. Would that be something you'd want to do as well, or?
Well, yeah, and I think we also have the opportunity, you're going to send out a draft, we could embellish your paragraphs. I mean, I think it's pretty clear for the members how this straw vote was pretty instructive. It was interesting. I'm surprised that it fell as clearly as it did on the first pass. So we could embellish your written report individually when we see the draft.
So committee, what do you prefer at this next juncture? Do you want us to talk about the sites per your suggestion that we have agreed are the top two, or and how would you like to go about discussing those? We still have to revisit the ones we didn't agree on, or not.
The criteria we didn't agree.
Right.
Well, that's in order to create some data so that you can say site X got this many votes and site Y got that many. But by the straw vote, you've already really created that. I'm happy to do as you suggest, Maria, because I think that's really where the meat of the issue is going to come, and see if we can get consensus amongst us.
I'd like to do it Maria's agenda as well. So let's start with what we want. But my feeling is that at this point, we should probably stop looking at the criteria and start being more qualitative rather than quantitative. And we should start saying specifically why something is good or why something is bad, and we still should say what the challenges are, even if we all agree on a particular site, because this is something that's going to council, and they should understand what we think the challenges of a particular site are. But it should be more qualitative. It shouldn't be like 6 of these votes and 4 of those and 7 of those. I think we're done with that part of it.
Anyone else? All right, so let's talk about our top choice and why. So I think it's a unanimous. So would you like to just go around the table and talk about that and your views? Is that okay?
I'll start. There are so many reasons that have been already mentioned. For my opinion is that in order for it to work via renovation, via addition, that the entire site needs to be looked as a specific plan. I believe the park does not work. I believe that if you were just to expand or just to renovate, you're going to continue having the issues that you have today. And I believe having the police make a statement then is not sufficient. They have hours that they have to fulfill, and so what happens during after hours? So I think that the city should look at the entire site as a specific site. And I don't know if mixed use is the right thing, if housing is the right thing, but that site needs to be more planned. And if you take the suggestion and then just do what renovation or addition is being proposed, then I believe the project will fail.
Thank you.
So similarly, there's a lot of reasons that geographically Sunrise Park is conducive for a library, and the nearby partners and other organizations, the retail across the street, I think is it's both like a neighborhood library, but has the retail component that I think we really want to make sure is accessible to the library. And so there's a lot of kind of like practical reasons I think that I'm definitely for. You know, I just want to make sure that we take advantage of this opportunity to dream big and hope and imagine something really phenomenal for this city, and that we don't, you know, just look at pipes and electricity and wires, and that we're giving the city, the residents here, really something that they deserve, and that whether. And what I hope we accomplish today is a robust conversation of, does this committee have a preference on expanding it, the building, renovating it, doing a second building? It's still really unclear to me how we feel about the building. I know how we feel about the site. I don't know how we feel about the building. And I'm surprised 6 weeks later that that's still the case. I don't even know how I feel about it, but I'm looking forward to that kind of conversation today, hopefully.
Thank you.
I think it was somebody from the audience who said that Sunrise Way is the locals' thoroughfare, where Palm Canyon is our visitors' thoroughfare, and that's summed it up so well for me, in part because I work on Sunrise Way and have for 14 years considered that my thoroughfare in Palm Springs. The other piece of where our current library is located that's really important to me is that it's surrounded by nature. It's surrounded by a park. And every time I drive down Sunrise Way, I'm in awe of the maturity of the trees that surround the library. And so even though Lot G is going to be across from a park, it is not, doesn't have the maturity of the years of this one. And so there's a reason why the members of our community who don't have a home to sleep in tonight choose to sleep under those trees versus in an alleyway up against a dumpster, right? Nature is very important. It's important for creativity. It's important for healing. It's important for so many reasons. And so I think how blessed are we that we have this institution of our library surrounded by an enormous amount of nature for Palm Springs. So to me, it just sets it apart.
Let's keep going. Yeah, just go on the line. Why not?
So I think I love that site, this site for all the reasons everyone has said, but because the community considers that their library site, and I hear it from community members all the time. I mean, I hear it from the parents at the school are always talking about that. They love it. They recognize it as their library site, and that's a reason that I like it as well. It's a very special place for my kids. But I feel like Maria, that if we're going to renovate this library and make it just amazing and incredible, the city should really consider renovating the entire area. I know the Boys and Girls Club is there. I don't know if any of you have ever gone in it. I have many times, and it is in disrepair, and it needs a lot of help, and it could be amazing. They do great things with what they have, but it would be wonderful if we could look to really renovate the site and not just the library.
Well, I want to thank the community for coming out also, and my fellow members on the committee. This is a big commitment. I started out about 3 years ago dreaming about a new library, and I dreamt about this new library on Block F downtown, and I thought having that opposite the new park with the museum as a cultural campus. And it was big enough, the site was big enough, it was prominent enough. I think it would have made a fantastic site for a very dynamic, exciting institution. And I spoke at it at public hearings, I spoke to the property owner, I spoke one-on-one with some of the council members. Didn't go anywhere, so I just backed off from that. I believe that Lot G is a very inferior site. I don't think it has any merit for a library. I don't know what the city's going to do with it. Maybe it's going to be affordable housing. I don't know. It doesn't really matter because the sites, I mean, it does matter, but it's not an attractive site for a library. It's kind of, I call it the rump of downtown. It's kind of it's back there. So I got off that, and I'm listening to the community, and I'm hearing you loud and strong. But I would like to list a few things that I think are really important to pay attention to when we get serious about designing either the expansion or the remodel of the existing building. And 100%, Maria, you hit it on the nail on the head. That park and all the buildings in it, it's like somebody took a bunch of dice and shook them up in their hand and threw it down on the ground. Those buildings do not have any relationship to each other. And it's going to take a really smart master planner to figure out how to make that a cohesive campus of all of those buildings. Those uses are fabulous there, but they don't interact with each other. They don't talk to each other. One is facing one way, one is facing the other way. They turn their back on each other. If they were somehow incorporated into a real campus, then you would get the synergy that we're all talking about. But we don't have it now, in my opinion. So master plan, one, that's the first thing. The second thing, yeah, it's nice to have a bookmobile police station parked in the park, but in order to protect the downtown park, the $7 or $8 million investment the city's putting down there, they have a police substation. So I'm recommending we think about a police substation as part of whatever we do, either as a corner of the new library or an administrative building or someplace within the park that's visible. But a police substation here, with the investment the city's putting here and the importance this site has for the community, I think is a must. Then, of course, it's the architect, right? It's going to come down to the architect. So we've got to look beyond a parochial list of who we've got on some bureaucratic schedule. And I didn't mean you.
I don't take offense.
And really, I think we need to sponsor some sort of competition and pick from really great designs. I think the building is essentially probably big enough, minus the administrative functions. And Linda spoke a couple weeks ago or last week on possibly building a new administrative building, which I like that idea. I think it might work to sort of bring a cohesion to the other buildings. You might create sort of a central plaza facing Sunrise between the existing building and the Boys and Girls Club. There might be some way of pulling them together, maybe a colonnade or something that works. So I think a separate administrative building, you clear out the administrative functions from the existing space, you probably have all the space you need. Parking, that's an issue no one's talked about, but is a big, big issue. We know with the stadium there. I don't like the idea of paving over the park to provide parking. I think that's a lose-lose situation, because it's going to just fill up with more stadium cars, and it's going to take away park land. There has to be a more creative way to address that in a way that discourages stadium use and encourages library use. So parking is a big issue. And then the other thing is, yeah, there's retail kind of close by, and I've used the library a lot, and CVS is my pharmacy, and I'm really embarrassed to say I've probably walked between those two 1 or 2 times. And I was thinking about it just when we were talking about this pedestrian and adjacent to retail. Why is that? I'm relatively healthy. I mean, I'm not 20 years old, but you've got that that residential highway, which is Sunrise Way. There needs to be some sort of enhanced pedestrian connection across that road to that retail to make that park and that retail kind of synergistic. So those are my points.
You're going to leave when I'm going to talk? You can. I don't blame you one bit, Lisa. I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you.
I apologize. I have to leave it. Catch a plane.
Michael, I am just so impressed with your thoughts, and I want to just build on those in a few ways. My thought has evolved a lot. I was on the 2013 subcommittee that the council had that was led by a previous council about whether the current building could be renovated or not. And then I was also a founding member of the Library Foundation, and our imperative was to decide how to build a new building at COD that the city and COD would share, and that was the raison d'etre of the foundation at the beginning. And I've listened to multiple library Board of Trustees thoughts and looked at those master plans, and this has been a really interesting exercise. I want to thank all of you because my thinking has evolved tremendously listening to you. So I think there was some ancient wisdom back in 4 decades ago in placing the library at Sunrise and Barristo. And while this is a flawed process because we've been constrained thinking about some of the issues that the council will have to deal with, it's been an interesting one. And I find it fascinating that we seem to have some consensus already. I would challenge the assumption or the I don't know where it comes from deep library wisdom, but I challenge it from a point of Palm Springs that we need 1 square foot per capita. In the 70s, they used the mandate of a half a square foot per capita, and they thought that by by the year 2000 or 2010, that we would have 60,000 people in Palm Springs. And here we are in 2019 and we have 45,000 people. And so I think those projections are interesting. I get that we expand to a tourist mode during the season where we're servicing hundreds of thousands of people. But I have come to think that the existing 30,000 square feet of the building is sufficient as long as you reconfigure the interior space. And I would suggest that if administrative services, and I defer to those on the library board who really understand administrative space, that it wants to go in the J.C. Fry building or adjacent over in that sort of area. I agree with you about not paving over the park. And so what we really need is a specific plan, a master plan. We need a master architect, and we need someone who is a master at logistics, because I believe you could remodel this building without having to close the library if you had someone who understood how to do that. Other libraries have. I get it that it's harder than just building a brand new one and moving over there, but I think we could tackle it if you had someone of that caliber to make that plan. Lastly, I think that it's very interesting to look at the idea of branches. And as the world turns and you deliver library services in different ways, we had branches that started in a house, or that started in a little rental space, or I can imagine all sorts of things that happen in the future. It's folly to think that we can understand what the library of 50 years wants to be. But I think we could entertain that. And then lastly, I would say that the complications of financing, since the city is unable to float a bond at this moment, are something that the council is going to have to consider. But that we were told to choose a site. I would choose the Sunrise site, but I want you to reconfigure the interior of this building without impinging on it, without ruining the architecture of it, and without changing except for the better, the dynamic of the area. So that's a tall order. I think it's possible. I can imagine a building in the northeast corner that accomplishes that and that changes the dynamic from the stadium, which is only used seasonally as well, mostly. So I agree with everything you said, Michael, and I would add those comments. So, thanks to the community for showing up.
I'm going to yield to Mike and come around this way. We'll get to him eventually. I'm not going to. Yeah.
Okay, jump to me at the end. And what I was actually going to start by saying is I was appreciating going at the end because I gotten to hear so many great comments, and I really do echo most of what all of you have said already about this site. It's a great opportunity to ask questions about, what is a library and who is a library for. where does a library need to be, and then how does the environment around the library enhance the library, and how does the library enhance the environment. And if you described for me a place that had a Boys and Girls Club, a senior center, a swim center, a skate park, a high school at one end, and a library, I would say, that's amazing. That's perfect. I don't think it works perfectly, but I think the idea of the city's main library being right there in Sunrise Park makes perfect sense. So I agree there's work to be done, I think, to really capitalize on the potential of that site and capitalize on the potential of the building while still providing a library that everybody will be very proud of 50 years. We don't know what they'll be doing inside of it, but they'll be very proud of it 50 years from now. So I just, my thinking also really has changed through the process of this subcommittee, and I just feel like that's a very, very strong option.
Mr. Morgan.
Okay. What I will do is talk a little bit, very briefly, about the choices that I'm not for at all, and then I'll end on the positive note of where I'm at. I'll start by saying, in my opinion, I feel that the North Palm Canyon site is really an attempt to put 10 pounds of space requirement into a 5-pound space requirement site. And so, to me, there's just no harmony there. College of the Desert, to me, it's accepting that you will probably live in a construction zone for a determined amount of period of time. And there was a woman here, and I think everyone feel that, who mentioned it. And Lot G, for me, this is just me personally, I just don't get any sense of enthusiasm when I think about going to that site and trying or achieving a crown jewel of a library or a destination library. And so that leaves the current site where the library is, that I feel very strongly it can efficiently and effectively be modernized to handle the requirements of today as well as future requirements. And there are some things against the current site, and I'll just say one thing as far as parking. Yeah, I know the stadium is there, and the police should not be used to solve everything, but there could be some slight enforcement of parking so that stadium parkers park in their designated parking space, leaving the library space free and available for library patrons. And also, I think that the current site could definitely, I would say, capitalize by coming up with an integrated plan with perhaps the Mizell Center and the Boys and Girls Club. And just one thought that comes to mind, if the Boys and Girls Club was renovated or something happened, that space or a portion of that space could be later used for some sort of meeting space for the library when they're trying to do partnership with industries, or retail or whatever that you have, or even modernism. So I would say that, in my opinion, it's not a Herculean task to reshape and reform the current library to meet our requirements that we have today for it and to meet the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
This is Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a couple of comments. I agree with what Michael and Maria and Tracy said. I think the site the current site is good if we have a specific plan and the uses there can integrate in some kind of way. the two detriments to the current site to me are that the city really has allowed the building to deteriorate, and the care it's taken and shown of the library is one of the reasons we're here today. Had things been fixed along the way, I don't think we would have the same discussion. So staying in the current site to me requires the city to be really committed to not only upgrading the site, but also maintaining it. Safety is a real concern on that site for me. I think that's one of the reasons I think it'll fail without a specific plan. And it's one of the reasons that the College of the Desert site is still attractive to me. I think if we can come up with a specific plan and a stunning architectural rendering of how this can work, I do think this is the best site and has the best prominence. But it does, for me, it does require a real commitment to not just upgrading the building, but also integrating the uses and possibly a plaza of some sort in the middle and changing the entrance of the library, the current site, so that we undo what was a fairly bad renovation that was done sometime 10 or 20 years ago, where the front entry of the library was changed. The other sites, to me, don't work. The Indian site, although I'm very excited about their commitment to it, is a bit too far, too isolated from the main population of the city. Lot G is a substandard site, and the site on Palm Canyon was just not large enough.
Thank you. What I'd like to add here is I will fall on the sword for this one because I think that I'm partially to blame for us to be at this point in our history of the library. About 3 years ago, the trustees were provided a proposal of renovating the current library. And at that time, I wish there had been as much interest in looking at that as we have now, but because it felt very rushed to make a decision about renovating that library, and it didn't feel like we had, by the way, I know there had been a lot of work into it, so I'm not discounting that, but it felt like that no one had bothered to say, is this the right decision? I think if we had put that process through this process we've gone through, I think that we would probably be much further along, because I don't think anyone really examined what other options there were. And I wanted to know what our other options were. I felt it was important. I also just wanted to say, and I can't remember who brought these. Brad. I've been a librarian for over 35 years. I'm very happy to say and very proud that I was at the opening of the Los Angeles. I was at the opening of the Shrewsbury, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And I've been to Berkeley Public many times. I say that because at one point in my career, I was in publishing for libraries, and so I had the opportunity of going to these sites. And I was at San Francisco Public when Los Angeles was opened again, because we were about to embark on building a new library next to the old one, and we wanted to see what Los Angeles had done. So we went there. And I can tell you that in the case of Los Angeles, there was a group of citizens having this very same discussion about the LA Main Library, because it was in a site that was considered unsafe. People didn't really, it was a thoroughfare for people to go to lunch from between office buildings, for those of you who've ever been in that building. And it was crammed. And they had these beautiful collections. They wanted to open up that building to make it much more of a public space. They were having this very same conversation. And the result is they did an addition that, unless you knew that, if you were to drop out of space and come to Los Angeles for the first time, you would know that they had done that, and it's remarkable. Shrewsbury, for those of you who've ever been to that part of the world, this library was the very typical New England library where the community ran it. The library director was one of my favorite people. I loved to have martinis with her when I did. And she fought hard to take the community from falling in love with this very little small, beautiful building that fit into the community quite nicely and saying, let's dream about what we can do for libraries. And they came together and created this addition to this building. And it is a remarkable building. It was then, and I'm sure it is now. She's long retired, but it's a beautiful building. So I share that with you guys because I think that the current site, having gone through this, I really want the community to dream big and to, I think one of you said that, is not hold back. As one of our speakers even said, let's let the architecture stand as part of the crown jewel, and what can we do to enhance that crown jewel? I think there's lots of opportunity there, and I think that we've touched on a nerve in the community that feels very strongly about that, and let's reverse that energy and say, what can we do? Because I really feel that in that library could be the catalyst for changing all of those things we've been talking about. I really do. I think that it could change everything in that park, everything around it. When I go into the children's room of our library, and I go into the children's room of other libraries, it makes me very sad that children go into that, and it's a beautiful facility in the way that we've had to make it work. But just think what a real children's room would do for our community, what an archive would do of our history. You know, those kinds of things, I think we have to dream big. And I think that site could very well accommodate it, and I think that we could find it in that site. But I think it's going to require this community to come together, put all those things aside and say, what can our library do for us? And then you look at, from going out, what it will do. And I think we can do that. I also have to say to the committee, clearly this is our number one choice. I think that I would like to urge us to have at least a backup choice to this so that City Council will feel that there is another option, because what happens if this one gets through the process and for some reason it doesn't go all the way through the process? And it could. So I think that even if this is our second choice, guys, it's really not our favorite, but it would have to do if we went to that option. Clearly the other options I think are not there's all the way down to we're not interested in this particular site. So I would just like to beg that we have that conversation and gather whatever that might be and go from there. So that's my comments.
Oh, well, I'll go first. My second choice is branch libraries, which is not necessarily on our list. I think that the COD site and the current site are basically the same in terms of the city, and that's why they rated quantitatively so similarly. I don't think that the length of construction at COD is the problem. It could be a satellite, or Lot G could be the place where you put a museum and a branch library, as was one of the imperatives that was thought of at the very beginning. But, and I understand operationally that branches are difficult, but we enjoyed that for, 40 years ago, and it worked really well. People lamented it, and in the 90s, the loss of those was terrible. So rather than, and I get the capital campaign is so much easier for a sexy new building, but I think that my second choice is branches.
Tracy, I want to clarify, branches and do nothing to the current building?
No, Ed's asking, my second choice, instead of coming with, okay, here's my second site, my second choice is we renovate the existing building and we get branches.
Great. Okay.
And maybe they're little mini branches, they're kiosk branches, they're bookmobile branches, I don't know, or they're rented. And so they have more flexibility operationally, or they're just digital. I don't know, but I think rather than saying I want to choose COD, or to me, a smaller library on COD or on Block G or another site in North Palm Springs are the same. So that's my second choice.
Fair enough.
If I have to have one.
Anybody else? Thoughts on that?
I like the idea of branches.
I'm sorry, Kathy, can you repeat that?
I just said that I like what Tracy's saying about branches. I do think that having a branch on the north end, possibly if the tribe was willing to put a branch at the site they're talking about, something on Lot G, I think that would be really exciting. And it would serve the city well.
Anyone else?
I like the idea about branches. I don't really have a second choice. I can't say. Was COD the one we voted to keep?
5 to 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
The ranking would be current site, COD, Lot G, Palm
I
Canyon.
can't, for various reasons, I could not, in my opinion, recommend that the council look at COD as a second choice. I don't see it happening, and I don't really have a second choice.
I think in looking at all so the COD, it potentially could be enough space, but the logistics of limited control, kind of the planning across the site, parking, all these other things gives me, there's way too many cons to make up for we'll have the space. I almost feel like if we needed an option 2, because it almost seems like there's Central City the current site and COD are 2 sites in Central Palm Springs, and then we have 2 downtown, right? And for me, I almost feel like maybe we look at having a much smaller library that is on city land that we control, and we have to give up some of the other things that we were looking for inside the building. But then overall, I still feel like we have more control than we would at COD. So it almost seems like, would you want a smaller library downtown over a big library at the COD? For me, I think yes. I think I'd probably go to the Palm Canyon rather than Lot G. It's not my preferred option 2, but it is, for me in my mind, an option to consider more favorably than on the COD campus.
I think it seems that the other sites, it seems like we're ready to go through the evaluation of the other sites and why they don't work, honestly, instead of coming up with a second site. Because otherwise, if we come up with a second site, we're trying to shove it or we're trying to force why that will be a legitimate second site. And there are more negative issues about each of those sites than positive that I can think of. So that's one thing. The other thing would be, just like Naomi was saying, it would be interesting that on the Palm Canyon side, if the city puts out an RFP that says whatever developer wants to build on the site, they can develop it, but they must include a branch library, and that's part of the deal, that they can put into the programming. But my sense is that right now we're ready to go through the other sites and tell you why they don't work.
I would just add, before we do that, I was one of the 5 yeses initially on the COD site. And so just to say my thinking there, I don't think it's a perfect site. Is it appropriate as a potential second site? I still would lean towards yes. With the original Palm Springs Library site, I talked about the potential of the location, but not the actual use currently, in my opinion. I would have the same feeling for the COD site. I think there is equal potential. It's not identical potential, but there's potential there. Is it designed? Do we know what that potential is? Do we know how it would work? No. So again, just in my thinking, I would, at this point still, in my personal opinion, keep that as a viable second option. I love the idea of branch. on the smaller lots, more towards the either north or towards the west. But in terms of a main site library, I would say still a second choice would be COD.
Well, there's one thing that develops with time, and that's always new ideas. And so if you ask me for a number one and a number two, my number one would be the current site. And then my number two is probably something that may catch you by surprise, but the tribal site. I mean, it has sufficient space and to build what's needed, have the requirements for the future, and perhaps look at that as a branch. Keep the main library, then develop on the something at the tribal site where you have meeting spaces for industry or more adult or oriented things there, so that perhaps transportation is not something that's becomes a huge issue for you.
Anybody else? Comments? So I feel it's my job as chair to push you, right? So I want to make sure we leave this room, we feel like we've had, because we've had an open conversation from the very beginning about this. So I think that what I'm hearing is that our recommendation is strong to the city council that the current site is where we need to invest our money and to build a world-class library facility on top of what we already have there and enhance that. I think that we then talk about the other options and why they just don't fit that vision. Remember, vision was important to us, and I think that I feel that it's not meeting the vision. And we identify why we think as a group of citizens that those other sites just don't quite meet what we envision, or the community who's been here very strong and loud, why it doesn't meet that criteria right now. So our report can clearly say, here's our top option. I love the idea of also saying that as part of this vision, we should revisit library service in our communities, either through branches or through, communities are faced with this all the time. So, there's other ways that we can get library service out to our communities. And I think the time has come for us to do that again. So I hear the committee loud and clear, unless you guys, I'm not hearing you. Is that, I think that's what everyone is saying, correct? Yes, sir.
I feel like there's one thing I have to say, and no disrespect to your opinion, Michael. Us creating a police substation to address the story that we say that it's unsafe at where the current library is no solution for people who have mental illness in our community, or people who are addicts in our community. I couldn't go on record with a report that says we should create a police state to address those issues in our community. Palm Springs, we all know, chases well in the desert around every 6 to 9 months, and that's a coward's way of managing what is truly a humanitarian response to people who don't have a roof over their heads. Yeah. And so, as I said, there's a reason, right, that homeless people are attracted to this beautiful park and versus sleeping up against a dumpster in our community. But deeper than that, as we improve the Boys and Girls Club and improve Mizell, we need to invest in caring for the people in our community who are sleeping up against our library. There was one other point I wanted to make about it, and it just skipped my mind. Yeah, if it comes back to me, I'll bring it back in.
Thank you for that. I would just expand on that maybe a little bit, where the current site being a place for community, and also, and we discussed this kind of I think in the beginning of a place where we can get social services and other agency partners, and that it's a place where all residents in the city know that they can get information and maybe have access to a counselor that can connect them to whatever referrals they might need. And so I hope that when we're thinking of the space, that's still part of the vision, that it's making sure we're including all partners that might benefit from being there, as opposed to a full station.
I think that we're not the first community to have this kind of conversation. I think that there is an opportunity for us to learn from other communities that have figured this out, to be honest. And I have worked in a community where the library was the social service information hub. And the population, it didn't matter who you were when you walked in the door, you were a customer of the library. And I think that that's something that I don't want to shove this to the next committee, because some of you may be on it.
Programming.
It's the programming committee. So when you really get into the programming of that facility and how you address these things, I think this is going to be something that we include. And how do you, and by the way, the staff are already part of this every day. So I think that you look at how's the best way to include all populations and how you serve them. And as a trustee, I think that's very important to the programming discussion. And as a matter of fact, trustees have already discussed, Jeannie has already launched a program that's getting closer to being a social service, where we're about to become a passport center. So there's an example there. We're thinking outside the box already, and how we can become much more of a service as well as the traditional role of libraries, which, by the way, all libraries are doing that, because it's called becoming relevant in the age of Wikipedia and online. And you got to think about ways that you bring them in, and once you bring them in, they will never leave, as we all know. So I think these are all great points that I agree with you. I don't want us to put into a report those kinds of things, but I think that we can say that this site is important because of the criteria that we've identified, and looking ahead for the programming, that we look at some of the issues that we felt it didn't meet up, and maybe that's where the programming gets into some of those areas. Is that fair enough? I think that's to me makes sense, but.
Go ahead.
But I think what David it's also referring is that how wonderful the story would be that we have a library and we have this open park, and it's become a home to a part of our community. And in the programming and the development of what can we do in the site through the specific plan, it can actually have a program for assisting them. So now when they come to our site, it's not just for sleeping or for escaping, is a place where they can get service, is a place where they can get better. So I think it's worthy to say that whatever you decide to do in this site, you have to address the issues that are going on in Palm Springs.
Do you have a sense, I was just going to ask you, do you have a sense from the council on the 23rd, are they going to constitute another committee that's going to be about programming, or that's going to be?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So the the Library Board of Trustees, along with the Friends and the Foundation, funded a strategic plan. It feels like it was years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. Where programming has already started being worked on, but for a new facility, it was waiting until that facility has been decided. Programming will be the next logical process. So we did not state that the city council would be involved in that, as much as they would start the ball rolling that, we're going to go somewhere, this is where the library is going to be, and then the library staff and whatever would kick in for the programming side. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, because it's been an interesting thing over the last 6 years that the council has usurped, sorry, I'll be politically incorrect, the council has usurped the Library Board of Trustees' administration of library services because they hold the purse strings. And they used to fund the library, and then the trustees really administered that. So it's been an interesting evolution. I'm not commenting on it. It's just that if the council's going to do that programming and not the Library Board of Trustees, or if it's going to be that, and I guess I don't want to be advocating for a massive addition to this building or addition that touches it without looking at the programming first. I mean, to me, I think we could have it within the walls, maybe minus administration. So.
Agree 100%. I would say I have 3 more years as a trustee.
Okay, good.
I hope that's good. I feel like we have the support that we would say naturally the city council, they have to make this decision because that will start whatever funding is, to get that rolling. I think when it comes to the programming, I would see a process very similar to what we just did with the public in part of that, because everyone I've ever been involved in, I've been involved in 3 programming discussions at libraries. You have librarian expertise naturally, right? And you have consultant expertise. But when it comes down to the community, you have to listen to what the community has. I think that what's been helpful in communities as large as San Francisco, for example, it really helped the community to see the possibilities by having experts come in and talk about what those possibilities would be. And then you decide, can we afford to do that? Or is it something where we have to, I would say to everybody in this room, the time will come where a library foundation is going to be having events and we're going to be selling everything from cookies to rooms. And we want everybody to write a check. I mean, this is going to be something that's going to involve the whole community, as you know, as a foundation member. So I think that it's, by the way, we won't be selling cookies. Please don't take that back to the Library Foundation. But I mean, it will be a major fundraising because the city's going to say, we can do so much. And then the community needs to do the rest. And that's where I think that gives, to answer your question, that's where the community and the trustees are then in the decision-making process about the programming if we're going to go out and raise the money to do it. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. That's my feeling on that, right?
Can I add to that?
Ed?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Kathy. In terms of our recommendations, I don't think we got a sense of whether people thought we needed branches. Whether the second recommendation was the College of the Desert was still COD, or the second recommendation is the need for branches, possibly within affordable, in RFPs for affordable housing.
Okay. So would you like to have a vote on that?
Mm-hmm. I think it would be yeah.
Okay. So we have a member asking to call for a vote. So let's try to, can you phrase that in
because
can someone phrase that?
When I'm saying branches are my second choice, it might be that the branch is at College of the Desert. I was one of the 5 that voted to retain College of the Desert, or I think it takes further thought. But I can't say, if you can't do the current building, they're going to have to renovate the current building. What are they going to do with it? Something has to be done. So I guess branches means to me community partners, it means rental space, it means any of these other sites that we considered. The tribal site could be an incredible branch, especially if they wanted to be partners.
Right.
But it's in addition.
In addition, yeah.
So it's not really quite a number 2 then, right?
Well, I mean, we have a downtown branch in the Wellwood in some ways, right? It's a digital offering and it's an archive offering. It's not much of a museum offering. So some other committee could say, these are the things that we're missing at the main library, or you could build some satellites and then renovate the building. I think somebody else is going to have to, some master architect and planner is going to have to work out those logistics. But to me, the second option is branches, or in addition to the renovation of this building, whatever the order of that is, the logistics of that are.
Can I just, I like very much the idea of branches and wondered why it hadn't come up, but we did address that question with Dr. Reddy at an early meeting, and he clarified that the charge to this committee was to come up with a site for a main library only.
So he's got our answer, and they've also asked individual committee members of the council have asked for a second choice, so that's the, maybe neither of which he'll like.
I agree with that. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is that branches also visited and redefined when we look at programming is the next phase.
Yeah.
So we could say we feel the original, our current site is the site to build this new library that we want, or the community wants. Include in that programming discussion what a branch would look like. And by the way, we already have one branch, and that's the Wellwood. So the Wellwood program could definitely be run through that filter once that branch filter is designed to make sure that it is part of what we feel it should be, right? And then we look at what other potential sites could be for branches. To me, that makes, we define what we want in a branch, and we go from there and use the Wellwood to become that first one. Why not? I mean, we already have it. It's under the library's control. And I've always felt like the program there probably needs to be revisited anyway. And it just, I think it does. So why not have some community involvement in that to revisit? Don't throw anything at me, Jean.
I'm not. I was just going to say it's coming up on its 5-year anniversary. It's been open for 5 years, so what a grand experiment we've had.
Exactly, and there could be services at the Wellwood that make sense to be into the new updated main library, and there could be services or collections that we put downtown to show our visitors and show people who want to come and see a beautiful building. So communities do that. I mean, I'm looking at one right now. I guess what I would suggest we say as a committee, I know that we probably weren't told to make a recommendation for additional buildings, but I'm okay with saying that we feel the current site meets all the, by the way, just so you know, the report is being drafted to show that whatever our top choice or second choice would be is why, as Lisa mentioned. So we will use the criteria and the site considerations to support that decision. And then we would go to, what we would suggest as being the next option. If I'm hearing branches, we'll vote on that, or a physical building, being College of the Desert as a location, then we would do the same thing. So that the city council would see our recommendation in a priority order is what we were asked to do, by the way. So with that, do you guys want to take a vote on, do you feel that we say we know the current site is our top choice? Do we follow that with revisiting the branch library system and what that could do for our community? Or do you want to have a second choice for College of the Desert?
I think Tracy had mentioned it before. It just seems like the branch, deciding what the structure, the services, if it's 3 staff or 1 robot, I don't know. But it seems like that would define if and how many branches to have, and that seems like more appropriate conversation for the programming committee, the next group. So I don't know. We can just say this is something that the next committee should look at, but I don't know if that means that we need to say this is option number 2.
I don't see it as a second choice. I think branches is a great idea, but the choice, because you even said remodel the existing library, and then branches. So it's like part of that. Mm-hmm. It's not the second choice. And again, I don't really see a second choice. So
well, but I can't advocate for the current site without some understanding of the logistics and the specific plan and how do you maintain library services during remodeling, and that you don't destroy the architecture by some addition, right? So
well, I think we can list. I think we can list concerns.
Yeah.
I think we can list concern. I think we have to list our concerns to council. I think that's an important part of the report. And if keeping the library open during the construction or seeking some temporary, we've got to call those things out.
Yeah.
I think
that's my point.
Yeah.
About and why branches. Well, we could just give them 1 and tell them sorry.
So is the nomination, no, not the nomination, but is the vote that we saying there's 1 choice and there is no second choice? I think that's what we're saying. So I pose that to be the vote. And if somebody says, no, I do have a second choice for sure, and let me tell you why, then let's bring that forth.
That's been our process so far, so why not? So are you calling for a motion to vote?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is, do we all agree that we're going to submit one, our current site as the only option? And for those who vote no, we'll ask, do they have a second option? Okay, so all in favor?
That's why you're the chair.
I just want to make sure this is what you were asking for. So all in favor, yes?
Sorry, I just have one question. So in our explanation of Sunrise, are we making any other recommendations or emphasis on our expectations of the building itself?
Yeah, I think that follows after the vote.
Okay.
I think we have to, or I can't support it without a whole bunch of caveats, right? That all of those concerns. I mean, because the COD and Sunrise are the same building site, basically. And if you discount everything that we're not supposed to think about, the cost, the parking, all those things, right? So they're similar to each other. But we're saying we want to renovate the Sunrise with all of these things taken into consideration.
If I could just say, I think, with all due respect, I think though the conditions are what create the need for a second option. So we say there's only one, but you must do these 10 things. And the answer is, sorry, we can only do 5 of those 10 things. So now where are we? I mean.
Okay, well, I mean, I could say that COD is the second choice, but they're still going to have to renovate this building somehow.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree.
I would say COD is the second choice because it's essentially the same site.
Yeah.
And if they can't do a specific plan that works on this site, then COD is the second choice.
I can't agree to that. I don't think COD can be a second choice. There's just too many unknowns, and I just couldn't say, I couldn't put my vote behind that. I think the current location should be our choice. I mean, we've all talked about how that's the best place, and I think we should leave it at that. I think just pushing through COD just because, with all of the things we don't know, because they haven't been very forthcoming, that doesn't mean that in the future they're not going to be more forthcoming. Maybe not, and maybe they're going to just do what they're doing now, which is basically not giving us much.
So could we make a recommendation that they renovate the current site with a bunch of considerations, starting with a specific plan? And should that be unacceptable to the council for whatever reason, that we can revisit the issue? And
I like it.
I'm dead serious because
I like that.
I think it's we've deliberated for a pretty long time. That's what we think. And if they don't like it and they're going to force us to look back again, over again, then that's a study of branches and program. And we could have a whole list of things that we need to consider before we can come up with a second one.
I can agree to that, and I'm beginning to lose power, so I can't stay on the line much longer.
Don't lose power, Kathy, don't lose power.
So is that a motion, Kathy? That sounds like a motion.
Well, we have
That's a motion.
we have a motion.
That we have one plan, but there are specific items, and if they can't do it, including a specific plan, then we would have to revisit and look at new sites.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. So logistically, as we have been talking, Sue's been
I'm still trying
gathering
to
every bit of
digest that
information.
last one.
So what we're going to do is she and I actually have started drafting the meat of the report for this information to be dropped in, which then is dropped into Jeannie's standard format for staff reports to city councils. And here's the other thing we have to remember. You may recall the Board of Trustees meet this Thursday morning at 10 a.m. in this room, and they want an opportunity to hear what our recommendation is. So they're going to have a section in the report of whatever comments they may come up with. And by the way, we've captured public comments. There will be a public section as well where we'll reference what we've heard from the public, as well as our record of all these meetings that we've been doing. As you guys recall, you've been on television and on YouTube.
I don't see a lot. go ahead.
Ed,
Yeah.
can I just confirm that it's this Thursday at 10?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, the trust, it's been very clear, the trustees are to just weigh in. It's not to change anything. They can't veto anything. It's more for them to have a chance to make a comment because they started the process. So they want to have at least something in their report. So, and I don't anticipate that being anything other than possibly an endorsement, or it may be a dissenting, well, how can you look at this? But we won't know until we meet, so. Yeah.
Well, what I wanted to say was, I don't see the list that I had or some of the other people here had as like a do or die. I see it more like a call to the designer. These are things the designer needs to solve, and I think it's all solvable. I don't think there's anything I've said or anybody else has said that's
I
like.
certainly agree with you.
Isn't the do or die the specific plan?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that question? I didn't hear
Yeah.
that.
I'm saying that
You or John?
the recommendation for the existing site is that they must start with a specific plan.
Agreed.
Site plan. I mean, a master plan.
Yeah, that includes programming, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Key.
Yeah.
Key is programming.
And fundraising.
Yeah.
Right? We all acknowledged
Yeah.
if we built a sexy new building, it would be much easier. We have a different strategy in Palm Springs. It's about preservation, right? And so we need to fundraise as if though a wrecking ball is going to take the building down. If we don't raise the funds to preserve it, we need to fundraise as if though the roof is caved in and it's rotting. And because it will be a bigger challenge. But if anybody can do it, it's the Palm Springs community who can raise
Agreed.
the money to preserve the library.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
But we have to light a fire to do
I'm
it.
going to have to leave the call.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. That means it's martini time. Martini time. Tracy, that was your job tonight. Okay, so I want to say thank you to all of you. So you will be getting a copy of the draft report to review, and I'm sorry, but you've got to quickly turn it around and get it back to us. What's today? Today's Monday? At least by Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Yeah, and remember, the Board of Trustees will have Thursday morning, and I'm very sorry, but we'll try to get to you as early as we can on Wednesday. Comments back to us Wednesday if you can, and so that we can incorporate that. And I will do my best to have you look at it one more time if I can, but we have to draft the report to get to the City Council that afternoon. And we've already asked for as much time as we can that day, but it has to be reviewed by the city to go into the reporting
So
format.
no reply means agreement.
I would prefer if you would, for the record, reply back and say, this looks good, Ed. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope to see you again sometime soon. If you have issues, and by the way, putting them in writing is okay. If you want to call me, that's okay too. I'm happy to talk, and we can do it that way. But just quickly send back if we haven't captured a really important point, okay? Again, thank all of you guys for your service. And
I want to say thank you for your
Yes.
service. Thank you so much.
And thank everyone in the audience who's still here. We appreciate that too very much. We're adjourned at 7:47.